Let's give a round of applause to Lori Richardson. Come on, Lori.
Thanks, Mark. I will not give a long, drawn-out introduction about myself.
But before we even begin, you do have this one interesting claim to fame
Yes.
around a certain social media channel that I think you're a little bit early on, before even early adopters. No. No, the big social network that we're going to be talking about as part of our branding exercise.
Okay.
Starts with an L. LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
I'm doing it.
This is how we handle
We've
it.
not rehearsed. LinkedIn. Yes.
But yeah, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your sales background and
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces. A few folks that I know here. And we're live streaming
We are live
the
streaming.
world. So, hi, everybody. That's great. My name's Lori Richardson. I do own a company called Score More Sales. My mission in life is to help leaders of companies solve their sales issues and fix their sales ecosystem. So for us, working with companies that already have a sales team that have sales issues is typically where we come into play. So it's often a mid-sized company or a very large SMB. And I have been involved in building my own personal brand as a seller, and then as a sales leader, and then in running Score More Sales for a long time. And what Mark was alluding to, I'll show you, my last slide is just the email that I got about when, I don't know if anyone received any early adopters on LinkedIn in here. So you got an email that said what number you were, and there's a way to look it up to find out. But I was on LinkedIn, in 2004, I think. It was like a long, long time ago. And I'll explain why I did that. It wasn't to find prospects, but I got on a long time ago. And I have embraced social selling tools since the very beginning. I feel like as a sales professional, your biggest job is to learn and to evolve, because that's what you have to do. It doesn't matter what age you are. I felt the same way in my early 20s. When in my early 20s, I signed up for a Toastmasters program because I wanted to be a more confident speaker. So it's always about evolving in sales.
Awesome. So we want to make this really interactive because I think there's a lot of questions around what it means to build your sales brand. There's a lot of different tools out there, social, but there's also more to that, just a lot deeper. So obviously you have some slides you can click through, but you have questions. So let's just make it interactive as we go along and kind of wrap on this whole topic. Let's know what you want. Let's know your question. So
yeah, and as long as we don't get caught in the weeds on a real single narrow issue, but if it's a more general question that has a broad appeal in the room, otherwise I'd be happy to talk to people offline. So
you want to take the clicker and
okay.
click through and we'll see what's up.
That's me. Am I going backwards?
You're going backwards.
I knew that. I'm a quick learner.
It's also part of building a brand, learning.
Go backwards, go forwards. So that's what I want to talk about, why it's important, how I've done it. I'm going to share a little bit about me. It may or may not apply to you in your situation. And I have some tips for success that I'll share as well. These are two of the brands that I've been building. Score More Sales, which was not the original name of the company when I started, but I hired a marketing person ultimately who helped me rebrand into a brand that made more sense. And it does have a sports metaphor because my son was a Division I college hockey player. He was a professional hockey player, and we had lots and lots of hockey players in our home growing up. So a lot of guys that ended up playing pro. One guy played for the U.S. Olympic team, been around a lot of athletes, and so Score More Sales kind of ties into that because there's so many similarities to how you do in sports and how you do in sales. There's some. What was the name before? That's a great question. Thanks, Steve. My original company name was Smile and Dial Revenue Generation Services. Yeah. But if you're in sales, you totally get it, because we were on the phones pretty heavy back then. But the issue was it didn't tie into my ultimate audience, who were C-level decision makers. And so that's why I rebranded. It was too lighthearted. It wasn't serious. It wasn't taken seriously. Let's see. And you can see I started blogging in 2004. I did it as a form of therapy for myself. I didn't have a grand plan to be a blogger or anything. We didn't really even know what it was back then when we started. But I would talk to people about really unusual sales situations, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to because I had launched my own company. I was a solopreneur. So I would go home and write about things. So for example, I met with a company that wanted me to work with their one sales rep. And the sales rep needed to call a lot of people as part of the job. And when I met her, she said, "I hate using the telephone." Oh. I'm like, what? So those are the kinds of things I would go back and write about, and then I would post it later, not like the next week, so they would know it's them. And it was all, it was all kept very well so that people didn't know who I was talking about. But I have written a lot, talked a lot. And the other brand, Women's Sales Pros, is a kind of a passion project that I started working on more seriously at the end of last year, where I am working to interview 100 women sales leaders, and I'm working to help encourage more women to consider sales as a profession, and women that are in sales to consider sales leadership, because there are very few women sales leaders, if anyone has noticed. So, thank you. Yeah, thumbs up in the back, that's great. Thanks. So that's something I've been working on, and I found that it's gaining traction. There's a lot of people interested in the idea, not as a women's issue, but as a leadership issue. So we also know there are studies now that show that companies are more profitable when they have both women and men on their boards, both women and men in leadership, and so there's actually some ROI involved in this. Now, Mark and I had talked. Originally, this was going to be a different topic today, and we changed it because both Mark and I were in Atlanta for the Rainmaker 2016 event. Was anybody there in here? Anybody hear about it? Frontline sales, yeah. And Gary Vee was the evening keynote, the last keynote speaker of the event. And after he spoke, I was just thinking, building your brand is such an important topic. And it's way more important than the other topic that I have in mind, which was more about productivity, which is very important too. But building your brand, without your brand, you have nothing. This is it ultimately what you can use to differentiate yourself. So we listened to Gary Vee, and Gary Vaynerchuk, his full name, if you're not familiar, he says everyone needs to think of themselves as a brand. And I believe that you also need to think of yourselves as a publisher, even if you're an individual, even if you're a salesperson or a sales manager, or you're the owner of your company, or you're investing in a company. You need to be able to publish to gain visibility. And I thought this was interesting. This is a quote from Forbes. that I got. You should be creating awareness for your brand by showcasing your achievements and success stories. So I have 9 tips, and I'll go through them pretty quickly, and then I'd love to open it up for some questions and interaction. Even as we go along, we may stop and have you guys do something. Anybody have any questions as we get going? So I think one of the first issues is that you know who you are, and by when I say that, you need to have some self-awareness. You know what your strengths are and the things that you're working on. How many of you feel like you know what your biggest strengths? Raise your hand if you know your biggest strength. Okay, let's take 1 minute and turn to the person next to you that you don't know and just share what you think one of your strengths is. So this is all about, we're all talking ourselves up tonight. So 1 minute, turn to your neighbor, share one strength. Each of you.
No, that's like just in general. In terms of, I have a potential $1 million client.
All right, 10 more seconds. Make sure the other person gets to talk too. All right, can everybody share? Okay. Did any answers surprise you? Were you surprised at what you said when you thought about it? What was an answer that your partner shared? Someone share about who their partner is. Yes, go ahead.
He's really good at saying no to people who aren't going to say yes.
He's good at saying no to people who aren't going to say yes. I like it.
There's a lot of resourcefulness.
Resourceful. That's great. What else? What else did you hear? Tenacity?
Not afraid to talk to anyone.
Not afraid to talk to anyone. That's great. Optimistic.
Yeah, builds trust.
Humor.
Humor.
Doesn't give up.
Doesn't give up.
Can get along with anyone.
Great.
Unrelenting positivity.
Unrelenting positivity. I love that. That's great. Anybody in the back? That's where you're sitting in the back, right? That's great. So knowing what your strengths are is hugely important in helping to build your own brand and convey who you are, because it's pointless to try to be someone you're not. And it's really hard to stand behind something that you're not sure about. So as you can be more clear about what it is that you like, you don't like, if you believe in your products and services that you represent, to me, that's a very first step. If you're incongruent, in other words, if you don't match up well believing in your product or service or the company that you work for, people can see it. People can see it. So it's kind of like a bad marriage. It's like kids know, kids know. People stay together for the kids, but kids know. So in that way, make sure that you're clear on what it is that you represent, your products, services, company, and your own personal brand. So that's the first couple. Know what your vision is, the end game. Now I have to say, when I started in sales a whole bunch of years ago, I was in my early 20s. I didn't know what my end game was. I just knew that I wanted to make money. And I was the head of the household. I was a young single mom. And I intentionally got into sales to make the same money that the guys made. That was my goal. In fact, I took a non-traditional program for women where we did nothing to do with selling. We did things like scaffolding. I poured cement. I learned electronics. I did all these different things so that I could learn some non-traditional jobs. And in the end, I ended up going into sales. And my very first line of action was to figure out the pay plan, figure out how I'm gonna make as much money as the people that I work with. And back then I started on straight commission, so I had no salary. Now when you're the head of a household and you have to pay the bills and bring home food, that can be quite nerve-wracking, but I did it. And I remember the guy that interviewed me said to me that there was more at the company in crumbs. I'll never forget that. I think it was years ago. He said, there's more here in crumbs than in most companies. And I said, that's great. So I can clean up the crumbs pretty good. So I knew that I would be all right. So that's how we started off. And I knew my vision. And one of the things you need to think about is, how you represent yourself. There's a couple of options.
I
Yes.
just have a quick question around vision. Like, what are you thinking there? Is that like a 1 year, 2 year, 10 year? What are you really talking about when you say build your vision?
That's a good question. I think that first of all, let's poll the audience. How many of you are a sales leader? So you lead a sales team. Okay, how many are individual contributors or sales rep? Okay, and how many of you own your business? You're an investor, etc. Okay, all right, so we have a mix. This is a very mixed, eclectic group. Your vision could differ. One's going to differ from another. I've always been a goal setter. I've always worked on creating my vision. I do vision boards, and things are achieved based on things that you can see. I'm very visual. Anybody else visual in here? Yeah. So the more you can, if you are visual, the more you can see things and lay them out, the more chance you are to achieve them because you look at them all the time. For a vision, I just knew that my word was the best thing I had going for me. And so my values really drove my vision. For me, at the end of the day, I had to be able to look in the mirror. And so I never did anything that was unethical in sales. Very easy to do in a lot of cases. There were many, many opportunities to do a little sleight of hand and to make things happen that weren't true, but that was one of mine. So for me, that was a driving force for me. And then beyond that, I set visions for, this year, next year, and, how I want to see my life down the road. So, but I contrast these two, Nordstrom, Kmart, Nordstrom, Kmart, and whatever's in between. Not to put down Kmart in any way, very low price items, go in and out, we're done. But they represent differently. They have different representations. So know what you stand for. The next thing is about being visible. And I know people that have been with big companies for a long time, and they kind of stayed insular. Did I say that right? Insular? It's a tough one. Stayed inside themselves and kind of forgot the rest of the world. When the economy has changed a couple times over the years, people realized they had to get back out there and reconnect with the rest of the world. And I say, you do it every day. If you're working for someone, you have to think about your brand, the brand of you. My brand is Lori Richardson. And every day, think about that. And think about, you can love your company. I think of my last corporate job, I loved it so much. was a wonderful opportunity. I got to create 2 different roles here in Boston, and yet I knew that, you know, someday I would probably do something different, which was true. And so I had to think about my own brand and keep working on that. So be visible. You know, are you on social media? Are you regularly, you know, choosing, even if you choose one channel that works well for you? How many people like Twitter, for example? Twitter, how about LinkedIn? Yep, it's a good LinkedIn group here. What else? Instagram. Snapchat. That's awesome.
But do you think it's sort of age related?
Is it age related? You know, I think, well,
I think
some of it is, yeah,
Snapchat is
for sure. Yeah, when you're talking about Snapchat, I know that anyone that is in a business environment that's doing B2B is typically doing something on LinkedIn. It'd be pretty unusual not to, but if you're more comfortable, you know, I think that definitely there's a lot going on in some of the other channels. For us, I would say that the best thing I ever did was get into blogging on a regular basis, talking about things that add value to my audience. And then we tie it in between Twitter and LinkedIn. So Twitter, LinkedIn, and blogging. I call it, you know, the trifecta of social. For us, that's great. And, you know, yes.
I don't know if you're going to talk about this later, Lori, but Twitter has been a sort of a funny platform, but it's been extremely valuable for us. We basically built our first 500 users of our product from Twitter.
Really?
Organic. Yeah,
Wow.
because there are so many salespeople on it.
Yeah. And when you say it's funny, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, it just, Twitter is kind of like a conversation that you're having in a stadium and everybody's shouting. Nobody really knows what's going on. And
Yeah.
occasionally you hear something and it's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, it is, and you do need some faith to be like, what am I doing? I felt that way about blogging for a long time. Who's been blogging for a number of years? Anybody here? Yeah, I blogged for 3 years before I thought anybody even read what I was writing. Yeah, and it's funny because then one day someone will say, oh, I've been following you for years and this and that. And it seems more rewarding at that point. But I always just kept at it. And, you know, what happens now is that people will say, you're everywhere. You know, you're out there. There are a number of events that are happening this week virtually that are totally interrelated or unrelated. And they're just kind of all coming together in this week. So I think of it kind of like putting boats out in the ocean. Like if you send out a boat, you don't know if it's going to hit land or not. So some boats, if you send out enough boats, some will hit land and some won't. And so I just tend to kind of put them out there and see what happens. And that's part of what I do to help build my brand. But I try to think about it all the time. So the brand of me as an individual is a brand that I'm working to build. Any questions about that or comments? Yes, go ahead.
Is part of it being visible, do you think it's also important to be visible in the community and church or BNIs or all these other things too?
Being visible, is it important to be visible in the community? I think it depends on what you do. I mean, I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I don't do business in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So I don't really need to be visible there, although there's some very lovely people there, and I like meeting them and knowing some of my neighbors. But when it comes to business, you know, it wouldn't make sense for me to go to a Chamber of Commerce event. It wouldn't make sense for me to do a local networking. It's better for me to do networking with people that are more in my niche. So depending on what you do, but I think that there's no substitute for being in person. That's why we're all here, right? Yes, see.
Yeah, it's kind of like a comment. I worked in a regulated industry, finance, for a long time, and anything you said or did was scrutinized, and so you said or did very little, you know, because you couldn't even get permission to do very much. It's changed in the last few years, but like you couldn't link, you couldn't do anything. And so for a lot of people who have spent time in these industries who are really antisocial, it's really a challenge to, once you leave, or now the companies are realizing you can capture all this. It was a problem because they wouldn't let you say anything that wasn't captured for regulatory purposes, and they didn't know how to capture it. So there's been a challenge for a lot of people who've been professionals for a long time because they never had the option of doing it. So you do have a whole group of people who are just getting into it and feel like they're taking baby steps, even though this has been around for quite some time.
Yeah. That's a good point. Another example, people, is anybody here from HubSpot? No? When you're hired at HubSpot, they encourage you to create a blog. Has anyone heard that? So that you kind of learn about inbound and how to build a brand. And I think that's a really neat thing to do. I think it's really neat as a sales rep. I mean, the best thing that sales reps that you have going for you is LinkedIn now. Because it's like your own web page. And I know years ago, as a salesperson, I wanted my own website. But it was, very different when I was selling. And now you can put content, you can promote the industry that you're in, you can become you can share your insights, and you can learn as you go. If you're younger and you don't have as many insights, I mean, that's the way I felt when I started my blog. I would talk about other people, and what I noticed other people talking about, and then eventually I had my own voice. So it doesn't matter young or old, or somewhere in between, there's always something to say. And I know even in regulated industries, I think about a number of years ago, I had a friend who sold insurance for MetLife. That's one with Snoopy, right? Snoopy's and he was in a community, so in his case, to your question about mixing in the community, he did a blog because he would get in trouble all the time about he couldn't say anything on a blog, but he wrote about the community, and he became the go-to guy in the community. So I think there's always a way to spin it, and if you're not in a geographic community, you can be the person that brings everybody together in the virtual community. I mean, Mark and C bringing people together in enterprise sales. They're known for that now, which is pretty cool. So, yes.
So I think it's really, really important. So I think as salespeople, we don't always, if you're not getting likes or comments all the time, that you don't think anybody's listening or getting the message. But I have conversations almost on a daily basis where people will say, oh my gosh, I've been following you, or I've been reading your posts for this amount of time. And you have no idea that these people are out there.
Yeah.
They don't do any activity to let you know that that's happening, but you're able to touch so many people that you're not even aware of. So even when you think you're not having an impact, you really are.
Yeah, you just have to have faith that there are people out there reading, and if you're matching up with your audience, I mean, if you're business to business and you're posting things on your LinkedIn profile about the industry that you're in, about something interesting that adds insight. So know the difference between information that everybody can look up and insight that takes a little thinking to put together. One of the best things you can do as a salesperson, maybe there's some kind of an ebook or some kind of document that you think your prospective customer or your existing customer might like. Don't just send them the ebook and say, hey, I think you might like this, but actually take some time and look inside and see something that you think might resonate for them. And then tell them, on page 4, it's talking about that same thing we were talking about last week. Wow, that's huge. Now, does that take time? Yeah. But so does calling people, and so does sending email. And I would contend that you can build better relationships by doing that. And if nothing else, they're gonna refer you on to somebody else because they know that you care and that you take the time. So that's my biggest beef with people on LinkedIn. I was just on, it was actually on a HubSpot blog post that Pete Caputa put together, I think it was yesterday, about things that bug us, smart, slimy things in sales. I don't know if anybody saw that. But it was that quickie LinkedIn thing where someone connects to you and then immediately you get an email from them and a LinkedIn message and they just tell you 4 paragraphs about what they're selling. Oh, it's just the worst. It is the worst. If anyone is doing that, please stop immediately. And anyone online that's listening, because it's just a horrible way to do business. You don't know me. I was nice enough to connect to you, so get to know me. Reference something. Another thing that people will do, and in my case, they'll say, "Oh, I read your stuff all the time, and I'd love to connect." You know, they probably say that to Jill Conrath and Trish Bertuzzi and everybody else. This blanket, "Hey, you're great. You know, you're wonderful. I'd love to." But if you say, "Hey, I saw the live stream of the Boston meetup, and I liked what you said about something," that stands out. And yes, it takes time and energy, but that's what building a career does. It takes effort, and you can't just phone it in. So the people that are doing mass emails to get to people and mass LinkedIn stuff, it doesn't work. And you get, your brand is tarnished because of it.
Can I just make one point? If you're gonna connect with people on LinkedIn, just literally take the 10 seconds or 15 seconds, just write something personal. It does matter. People read that. When they see something in context that references them, like that puts you like 50 notches higher, because it's easy to click that connect button and use the default reading or thing, but don't do that. That's what everyone else does. You stand out. You build your brand by being personal, by adding just that little bit of extra into your connection request.
Personalize your message. I will say that LinkedIn has made it difficult, because on the mobile app, all you have to do is push a button and it'll send a connection request.
I know, that's.
And a lot of people don't know that there's another way to do it.
Even
So,
reading those messages is hard on the web or anything. You have to like hover over the little button.
yeah, they made it hard. Yeah.
But why would you connect with people you don't know anyway? On
People
LinkedIn?
do it all the time.
I
Yeah.
understand. People do a lot of things all the time too.
No, it's,
But
Yeah.
smart.
Well, I connect with people I don't know because I want to get to know them. But I will find some reason. I'll find some connect, some link, even if it's not a person. I'll find something by looking at their profile, and then. But I have an upgraded account, and so I would send an email probably if I didn't know them. So, yes.
I wanted to ask you, because you've been building your brand for a while, like has the trajectory changed? Have you gone back at any point and reevaluated? Like, because you're putting all this effort to establish this you, and at any point, like, you backtrack, because once you've established it, you've got to keep owning that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, that's something that the younger you are too, the more you have to think about that. Because I didn't think about my brand when I was 20. I just did stuff, I just tried to work really hard and support my family. But it's a good question. I would say that fortunately for me, I haven't had to backtrack and change anything, because what I do today is very much what I enjoy doing, and I did it before. What I have done though is I've changed to be doing less with prospecting, and I used to say leads and leadership, that I help companies with leads and leadership, because it's a good business to. Everybody needs help prospecting. I can do that all day long, helping companies do that. But the more I got involved in interviewing women sales leaders, it was a little disjointed with leads, so I just dropped the leads. So that's a really good question. Now our focus in the company is more on leadership, and helping with overall, process and methodology, and it ties in with the work I do with women in leadership.
It is a good point though about when you go ahead and build your brand in your earlier career, well, that's not going to be the only career you have. You may switch around. You may have different industries. You may have even entirely different jobs. And for myself, I was a programmer, trader, enterprise sales, investor, so I have a lot of different personas. So I think to that point, trying to build up the things that are about you, ultimately, and try not to get too stuck into selling to a company, or those are like secondary things that we were talking about before. Sell yourself, sell your company, and lastly, it's about the product or solution.
Yeah, you always sell yourself first, company second, product or service third, or vice versa. Depending on who you are, 2 and 3 might differ. But I always sold myself first, because in sales we know that buyers care who they buy from, and that when buyers were evaluated about why they chose to do business with a certain company, there's a stat out there about it's very high that it was based on the salesperson. And so, that's a great thing to know. So that's why you got to work on that brand. But we were talking about Gary Vaynerchuk earlier before we started too. I mean, he was a wine guy. He helped his family. His dad had a liquor store, and he started out learning about wine. And then once he got online, he built a wine library. He wasn't the Gary Vee that we know now.
It's funny because when I first met Gary Vee, he was this guy who was getting into angel investing in New York City tech companies back in 2008, 2009, 2010, and so on. So he didn't have all the books. It wasn't Gary Vee, the brand. It was this guy who had this wine library TV, which was big, but it definitely was a very different persona if you look back then to what he is now. But you can kind of connect the dots, and you can still see who he is through all those different iterations.
I like that he said that he didn't give any advice out till he was 36, I think, which is great. Yes?
I think it's important though, you kind of downplay that, early in your career you didn't think about it, but you were, unconsciously building your brand then by working hard, creating value to your customers. And I think that's important not to be lost in this day of social media, that it's not just about the social media. And I think you made the point earlier about, being meaningful, but you still got to have your core delivery. You still got to go out and sell products, sell service, hit your number at the end of the day. And that's a big part of how you're going to start to establish your brand and your trust and your reputation inside that industry that will carry across industries. The most important thing too. But subconsciously you were, without knowing it, building your brand early on. I think that's important to people that are early in their career to remember is you've got to go out and create value too. You can't, this isn't all just about, smoking mirrors.
Yeah, definitely we're shaped by what we were surrounded with. I know for me, I came from a hardworking family, and I grew up in a family-run business. My grandmother had a clothing store that I grew up in, and I didn't realize it at the time, but later I realized that she only had a sale twice a year, and so she didn't discount, and she built her reputation through word of mouth, and she competed with Nordstrom, because I grew up in Seattle, and that was her competitor, was Nordstrom, and she was a little one store shop at one point, and she had a couple locations. But I learned later that that's where I learned about value and about people, was through that.
Comes back to, again, self-awareness, who you are as a person. So taking the time actually categorize what do you value, what do you do, but then to your point, it's about adding value to others and doing things that you are proud of, that you like.
Yeah, and if there's any doubt, just add value. Just add value, because that'll lead to one of my next points in a moment. But be proud of your work too, and I think that's critical in sales. So connect to bigger brands. this is the enterprise sales meetup. It's growing to be a national brand. It's great to be connected to this. And without extra effort, I'm able to be a part of that and build my brand this way, and vice versa. It's a win-win situation for us. Staying up to date online. People that have really old, you go to a website and it's real old, you go, ew, right? I mean, it affects you. If you work for a company that has an old website, I would kindly let the people that run the company know that affects how people perceive you. And it's almost like the receptionist, it's the first impression. If someone yells at you, or if they're really rude to you when you first call in, you don't want to talk to them. But you need to be up to date and be current. There are websites I go to and it shows that that's from 2015. Like, okay, well that was last year. What are you doing this year? So those things are important. Wouldn't you agree?
It actually reminds me of, so in the investor world, you have all these VCs that are out there, and there was this really funny Twitter account, I don't know if it's still around anymore, but we basically would mock all the websites of VCs because they're so dated, right? You think, oh, VCs, innovation economy, and
Right.
talk up innovation, they're investing in all these cool cutting edge startups.
Yeah.
And you go to the website and say, gee, it's not 2001. That was like pre-dot-com bust.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? This is how you represent yourself. And it's a little bit different nowadays because a lot of VCs have kind of gone a little bit hipper to the fact that you need to have a better presence. But that's VCs, but it applies to everyone.
Yeah, and there are definitely more traditional companies that, have regulations and have, reasons for not doing the latest and greatest thing. So I'm not talking about, changing every few months or anything, but to be current and, it matters. And then gain visibility through others. So that's, it's again, people can be especially when you're in sales, I think one of the biggest things people don't do is they don't make enough connections with people who can be strategic referrers, strategic partners. It's a whole nother workshop. But it ties in with building your brand because there are people out there, when they really understand what you do and how you add value, they can be your salespeople out on the street. Even if you're in sales, you can have someone else that's referring you business all the time. I used to do it all the time. And it helps you to be in more places at the same time. And online, the web is your trade booth. It's like a trade show booth, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So you want to make sure that you're well represented there.
There's a great quote I saw before that said, the great thing about social media is that it's selling for you while you're asleep. Because honestly, it's always out there. And so you don't have to work for it, you keep that up. And that's working on your behalf. Whether you're big on Twitter, whether you're big on LinkedIn, whether Snapchat's your game, like that stuff, it remains out there as part of your persona when you aren't necessarily focused on it, when you're traveling around and busy with other things. People can still refer to that and get a sense of, okay, this is who Lori Richardson is. She has this company, Score More Sales. She has some really great insights about women executives and leadership, and I want to learn more. And people can kind of follow the trail.
And by the same token, to be on the other side of that, sometimes I think, I wonder what opportunities I missed because of the way I'm representing myself. Because sometimes you'll hear about something that happened and I've heard from someone, they go, oh, I didn't think you did that, right? I didn't think I didn't think you worked with companies on the West Coast, or I didn't think you were international, you work with international companies. And so it's all about how you keep checking, keep looking to see how you present yourself and get feedback from other people. It's important.
Always like just ask people. I think the other thing is that you end up being insular, like, oh, let me just do this myself. It's okay to ask for feedback and say, hey, what do you think of my account, or what do you think about this blog post? Get people's opinions, I'm always trying to get people's opinions about the enterprise sales meetup. What are your thoughts? What are you thinking? What topics are of interest? And I was asking you if you have any ideas for topics. Please let me know. Please let the C know. But it's always important just to not have it just be unidirectional. You want it to be bidirectional. You want to have a community. You want to have enable conversations about your online presence.
There's my email from Reed Hoffman. So that's number 29,426. I'm only sharing that because how many hundreds of millions of people are on LinkedIn?
400 million or something like
I
that.
was an early adopter. And what's interesting is that I only got on I got on LinkedIn. It was very much a resume service then. Everybody thought of LinkedIn as a resume. It's where you put your resume. But I wanted to connect with people. I happened to I left Boston. It was actually 2002. I probably got on LinkedIn in 2003. And I'm not even sure, but I wanted to keep in touch with the great people that I met in my last company. I was the employee number 35. When I left, we had close to 400, and our company was sold a couple of years later to Thomson Reuters. And so I wanted to keep in touch with these awesome people who, funny, many of us still keep in touch. We had a reunion last year. It's been 16, 17 years. So yeah, it's pretty cool. There are a lot of people that say it was like the best bunch of people they ever worked with. But I got on to make referral connections, to find people to be strategic referrers. And that's all I did on LinkedIn for a long time. And so that the idea of actually looking for customers, prospects, was a different one for me, even though my background is sales. And I totally get it, and I actually help people with it. But I still think it's important to build a network of strategic referrers that can help you, that they'll sell on your behalf. That's the way to go.
I think that it's a good point around, particularly social media. It seems so with more things. Like, okay, so how do I use this for sales? I get that I should not use my LinkedIn profile as a resume, but maybe add value and provide more information for people that might be buyers. But in terms of finding referrers or referrals or using LinkedIn, it seems like ROI and social media seem so distant.
Yeah.
So I mean, what are some of the things that you actually did to maybe facilitate that,
For
to find prospects?
I mean, I just, think of your company in the middle of a circle, okay? So you're in the middle of this circle, and you can build spokes out from the middle. And think of all the different companies that have something to do with your industry. They don't do what you do. So for example, if I'm in sales, it's really good for me to know marketers, because I can refer marketing people. I can refer all sorts of data companies. They come to us all the time, sales tool companies. Those are all people that can refer me, I can refer them, and there's no overlapping. I mean, it's very clear, and all I have to do is keep connecting with them. Because that's the funny thing, it's like we make a connection, then it's like, well, we're connected on LinkedIn, whatever. But do you go back and say, hey Mark, how you doing? Do you have any meetups coming up? If you're back in Boston, I'd love to do something. People don't follow up with their strategic partners. So what I like to see people have a list of customers, right? You have your list of customers, you have your list of prospects, prospective customers you're working with. Then there's a third list. And the third list are these strategic referrers that you need to contact once a quarter, at least once a quarter. Send them a card at the holidays, meet up with them if they're local, and do that regularly, because those people can refer you multiple customers. And yet most of us do not put any process in place around strategic referrers. We're just like, hey, run into them, in an event, hey, we should get together.
It's like a bunch of one-offs.
Yeah.
So you don't really think about it, because maybe once in a blue moon something good comes out of it, but you don't make it a rigorous practice.
Yeah, to me, it's just, maybe I'm lazy, I don't know. But, if Mark can refer me 10 customers, and everybody else is one up, one up, one up, one up, why wouldn't I want to follow up with Mark on a regular basis and help him and add value to what he's doing? Because to me, it's just the most obvious thing on earth.
And again, it just adds your value and your brand to people know that you are someone that who has some expertise and you can connect people as well.
Yeah.
And so people they build value. Okay, this is the first time you need to be connected with. I need to just follow and do business with it.
Right. And
Whether some work or some don't, I know that this is going to lead to big things.
yeah, and I think the biggest challenge is for you really to know what I do. So I have to be very clear, and I'm not always giving him a sales pitch, but every now and then I might share a success story about something I did so that he knows, oh, that's what she does. Did you want to add something?
I just want to ask if you have a process that you follow for that, or some way of remembering to do that consistently.
I put it in my CRM system, and with strategic partners, I make sure that there's a reminder every quarter. So I have about 60 strategic partners. And then there are other groups and affiliations that I'm involved in too. But it's really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I do is, because at this point I have so many connections over a lot of years, you have to figure out ways of putting folks in buckets. And there's different tools that make it easy to do that, which aren't Salesforce. But there's some really great tools I use to manage my own contacts. Some people use full contacts, some use them tactually. There's a lot of good things, but you can kind of group people together. And what I do every maybe quarter, every half year or so, just do a newsletter just for those people. Just let them know, put them up to. And it's funny that you actually do get not just responses, but actual potential business out of that as well. Because people now know, oh, that's what you're up to. So Mark, I didn't realize you were doing this really interesting B2B networking thing for salespeople, and then you were expanding out west. Well, I have a group down here in San Diego. I'd love to have you down and maybe start a group. And in fact, that's how a lot of the different groups are starting up around the country to form, because I made it just a practice of having those regular quarterly or half-year updates. But the other thing I do as well is I make sure that people see that I have some activity on things like LinkedIn, because people do check LinkedIn. So don't forget about those channels as well. And you have some rigor around that as well. Like I have a regular practice around trying to at least get an update up there, at least every couple of days, so people know, okay, well I have an event, or I have a post, or I'm sharing something. So people are always kind of top of mind as to, oh, what's Mark up to?
I think it's developing the rigor. It's the discipline. I mean, these are great ideas, but it's all about being disciplined enough to pick 2 or 3 that you're going to stick with. And that's what leads to success, is really sticking with the discipline.
I tell people, don't try and do a whole lot of things, do one thing really well. So look, I understand for some folks that Twitter is just not your cup of tea. And it is hard to potentially generate business if you're into certain types of industries or sell certain things. It may not be most beneficial. But for some folks, like Adam was saying, Twitter was amazingly excellent. So double down on that. But the point is figure out the things that work for you.
And where your customers are,
Exactly.
because that's where you need to be. If you're in sales or sales leadership, go where your customers are. If they're, if it's more of a B2C thing, then, maybe it's Facebook. But, for me, I found people on Twitter and LinkedIn, and it's worked really well together.
But what are there things that some of you are using today that you find effective, or have you found any tips to help you get more activity on some of these channels, or even just a story? Anyone want to share anything?
Well, I can speak loud enough, I think, probably. The influencers.
Live stream.
Right. Oh, the local influencers. I'm Bob McHugh with Signal Labs. By the way, if you want to find the noise in Twitter, that's one of the things that we do. But I've been doing a lot of the casual reach outs, because I left Thomson Reuters actually I worked there 6 years, and I started a startup, and I've been reaching out to, you know, people that looked like they had tons of connections, knew what they were doing, and I've just been asking if they want to meet at a coffee shop, you know, get their feedback on what we're doing, and if it leads to something great, but that's kind of been my approach, and then it got me into, you know, kind of demo magic, you know, kind of momentum as well. But I just wanted to say that's something I've been using.
Maggie, that's something.
Yeah,
We're all coughing.
No, I think it's just really important to have a methodology and, you know, to really try to do at least one type of social media post a day at least, right? So, but, you know, it's a give and take, right? So if you want to help those who can help you, and vice versa, but, you know, you want to make people evangelical about what you do and the service that you provide, and I think that you do that by being genuine and building relationships, not just to see, you know, Mark, you know more people, so you can get me in places. It's about, well, how can I really help Mark in what he's doing? So I think if you're genuine about it and be disciplined and get things out there, that's, you know, it'll come back as karma. Social media
Karma, that's right. I have a question, I'm gonna ask you, Suzanne. Suzanne runs a sales leader roundtable for sales executives, and my question is, how do you find people to fill up your roundtable?
The biggest source of business for me are the CEO roundtable type of groups. Those are groups that meet once a month. They have between sometimes 8 and all the way up to 17 or 18 CEOs from non-competing companies. They meet once a month, and help each other problem solve. And my big networking opportunity is with the facilitator of the CEO group. So I keep in touch with him or her often and talk to them. And if any of the members of the roundtable are having particular problems with regard to sales management, hopefully they'll think of me.
See, so that ties in with that's a great referral source, because the facilitator isn't gonna do what you're doing, so there's no competition issues.
And what I like about it as well is that it mixes all the online activity with offline,
Yeah.
meeting people in person. You know, much like this type of event.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for being able to bring the online into offline and offline into online.
Yeah, and one to many, being able to meet multiple people in one evening is a great thing to do too. Great, anybody else?
story of words.
I have a question.
I would just encourage everybody to be loud, though, on these social media channels. Loud.
Noise.
And, you know, it's once a day on LinkedIn is probably good. I'd say 30 times a day on Twitter.
Wow.
50 times a day on Twitter.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that's a good point about frequency and different channels, right? Because like LinkedIn, most people, like with any channel, not everyone's there like 24/7. Understand that. People check in, check out. But Twitter is particularly like crazy and hectic, right? It's just a live time stream. So you're gonna miss a ton of stuff. So if you're not trying to.
But why not? See, I'm gonna go to the boss sales hashtag tonight and see what was shared. Like, I would never, for me, that wouldn't work. Even though we use Twitter, we leverage it a different way. But I look at who's, who I'm talking up and who's talking me up and things like that. But that's interesting. You have a whole different use, a whole different way you use it. That's fascinating.
I'm not an advanced LinkedIn user. Can you recommend places to help you learn how to use it better?
To get better on LinkedIn. Well, first of all, there's some really great articles and posts and books. I know that LinkedIn Sales, right on LinkedIn, if you Google LinkedIn Sales Solutions, they have a lot of good resources. And then there are a number of people, like we know Bryn Tillman, and Bryn Tillman is a LinkedIn expert. There are a lot of people that have put books together. I know Jill Conrath did one with Meredith Albee a couple years ago.
And just look up.
There's software out there, RockTech. I don't know if anybody's used that.
What's that?
RockTech.
RockTech?
Yeah, there's a software, I'm at GE, so we actually use it for all of our Salesforce, our entire Salesforce, and it walks them through a video and it asks them, have you done this update, do this update? So it's actually a software navigation of, how to better leverage LinkedIn. I don't know if you could buy individual packages or licenses or whether it's only enterprise, but so
Right.
check it out.
But there are plenty of people like Bryn Tillman, Coca Sexton. I have actually, I'll share this out in the email, the wrap up of this evening's event. I actually wrote a post just think about your LinkedIn profile, right? Just things that you can do, 9 or so steps. Just get started. Just to boost that.
The HubSpot sales blog and the marketing blog, they have really good, I've written about LinkedIn a whole bunch of times too. So there's some good, if you just Google it, go to your friend Google, they'll know. Right by your friend Hoover. Got 2 new friends. Anybody else? Any other tips, strategies?
I would use a tool, I think it's brandyourself.com.
Brandyourself.com?
I think that's what it is, I'm trying to remember, but it's a website that basically connects to all your social media and it lets you know like how you're doing for your own name, like ranking on Google, and it helps you optimize for name and things like that.
Actually, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What do you think about the LinkedIn Social Selling Index? I think it's worthwhile.
Interesting.
Interesting. So for those who don't know,
Yeah.
maybe you could explain.
Yeah, I was just talking about that online recently. Does anyone know their LinkedIn Social Selling Index? It's called the SSI score. So yeah, so you can, and that's another thing, you can Google my LinkedIn Social SSI score, and LinkedIn will show you exactly where to go to click to find out what your score is. They have 4 different categories. I think it's weighted heavily toward a few things, such as, because I talked to Coca Sexton about this, and sending in-mails is one of the things. So if you have a free LinkedIn account, you're not going to do as well. I have a paid LinkedIn account. I do a lot of in-mails, but I don't have a ton of posts in LinkedIn because I have a blog, 2 blogs actually, where we post stuff. So I'm working to do more of that, but I still have a really high SSI score, and I mean, I think it's an interesting point. And I think if you have a really low score, then it will show you some areas and ways you can improve. But once you get over, 80 or something, I don't think it really matters.
It's pointless, but to me, it just conveys this sense of narcissism, ego. It feeds into, I have a high score.
100.
It's kind of like, I have like 10,000 Twitter followers. It's not the numbers that really matter. It's the people that you're actually connected to that matter. So it doesn't matter whether you have 5,000, 10,000. Honestly, of all that big, huge population, not all of them are listening or even really care. You have your fans. You have the people who really do care about what you say day in and day out. And those are the people you focus on. Because those are going to be the folks that you're going to potentially generate business with. You'll lead to referrals and will be references and will be able to help you out down the road and vice versa. You help them out as well.
Yeah, I saw a post today or yesterday of somebody that it was like the top connected people on LinkedIn because they're connected to a couple 100,000 people. So what?
It's like what was it? The LinkedIn Open Networkers or Lions. They got 29,000 followers. Just connected to everyone. Half of it was a bots, which is also another thing.
Right.
You don't connect to everyone.
Right. I know who I'm connected to, and I'm working to remove some connections, just like I do on Facebook. Every day it'll be somebody's birthday, and I'm like, who is that person? How did I ever connect to them? And I figure out, I don't even know them, and so I'll take them off because I don't have the bandwidth. And I think with LinkedIn, I connect with interesting people, and I might not know them, but if they don't have anything to do with my world, and I don't have much to do with their world, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So scrutinize your connections. And the other thing is you have a wealth of potential within your connections. Do you ever look through them? Do something every Monday or, Friday afternoon and go through the Z's or the R's or the T's, in different, or find other ways to do that in different social tools. Yes?
So you're just talking about curation now and Ben, which I think is interesting. how do you balance that? It's like, for me, it's tempting sometimes, like, just to spend a day curating, and I'm not necessarily being
That'd be fun.
super productive.
Yeah.
I'm doing that as procrastination. Like,
Yes.
how do you balance that? It's like, what point do you need to go and do that? It's like triage versus.
Yeah, so the question is, how do you balance? First of all, I don't think you do. Not in my world. I don't have any balance. So I'm not a good person to ask, but how do you curate? I mean, I have taught people in sales how to do social in about 15 minutes a day. So you don't need to spend hours to do certain tasks that help you with your real job if you're in sales, which is to sell more and sell regularly. And so if I'm in sales, at the end of the week, I want to think about what are the activities that I've done that lead me to more sales. And if hanging out on social media, if I haven't had interesting conversations with people, then I need to do something different. But I think it's real easy to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, you gotta be super, super careful. I mean, time is your most important resource as a sales rep. And so you need to focus your day on revenue generating activities. And a lot of stuff on social tends to just not be very revenue producing or productive. So you gotta be able to parcel out time to maybe do some of those extra activities, because they are important, but the benefit is more long term. So doing maybe some of that cleanup work, or doing a little bit of researching, gathering some content, dedicated 15 sections to your point, that's either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, so it doesn't get to interfere with things you need to do during the day to get deals closed or to find deals.
Yeah, you have to be, that's another time where you need good self-awareness and be honest with yourself if you're really working on. Again, if you're in a sales role, that's your job. And if you're a sales leader, you're setting an example, so it's important too. But the thing about time is that you never get it back. It's gone. That minute we just had, it was gone. It's gone. So it's nice to be able to leave at the end of the day or the end of the week feeling like you have accomplished some things. So it goes back to productivity, I guess.
How are folks maybe using Twitter besides that? Any interesting Twitter experiences out there? We have the enterprise sales tweet volunteer out there. Do you have anything to share?
Well, personally, not other than when I'm not on the enterprise sales. I'm a huge fan of GIFs. I think they're extremely
GIFs?
GIFs, yeah, the moving images. If you go to Giphy, GIPHY.com, it is amazing. You can find a GIF for anything. It's just really relevant. It's stuff you just pull from like a movie or a relevant show that everyone knows about. And like I did it today. I went to Starbucks and I had a mobile order. And when I walked in, there was literally like so many people in there, and I literally just went right in, grabbed my drink, and went out, and I felt super VIP. Tweeted at Starbucks and said like me when I walked into Starbucks and had a mobile order, and it was like an old Britney Spears music video of her like getting pictures taken at her, whatever, like walking down the red carpet. It was a huge hit, guys, 6 hearts. So yeah, gifts just like they add personality, they're really relevant, and people like really use them on my company. They're huge.
Yeah. I think that's a good point about your brand. Try not to be boring. And I know it's kind of tough, and maybe some of us are in things that may not necessarily evoke tons and tons of excitement. I worked at Oracle. Your database and apps only get so interesting.
Right.
But this is your brand, so try to infuse it with something. Have some interest. Be able to feel free to share that, because the thing about your brand is that it's not just about business; it's about you being authentic. I think we lose sight of that. That it's.
Yeah, I have a friend in the Boston area named Sue Zimmerman, and she's Sue B. Zimmerman on Instagram, and she's also known as the Instagram gal, and she's built a whole huge career, virtual career, through teaching people about Instagram. And she started just by learning about it, because she was very visual, and she's big time now. It's cool.
And I make it a point whenever I interview someone for an enterprise sales video pass, introduce yourself, but share one interesting thing that not a lot of people would know about. Right? Because we have the business side of who we are, and then we have this other side that we don't necessarily let escape every so often. You know, maybe it gets out every once in a while at the Christmas party or the holiday party, but outside that, it's like
a couple cocktails.
yeah, you know, with a couple of cocktails and there's dancing on tables and all that. But you know, for me, I try to be fairly open. So when I introduce myself, people ask, okay, what's your short bio for this or that? You know, there's a business stuff, but then there's kind of little odd tidbits like my love of a tree metal and my love of dumplings, right? So people kind of associate, they kind of know that about me, and it adds a layer of connection, a layer of, okay, well, I can approach this person. Approachability is a big thing.
Yeah.
Any other last thoughts? You don't want to share a personal story?
The back.
Please.
I have one on Twitter that's actually really good. I replied to the CEO of Anthem Insurance. It was like, had something about customer experience or whatever, and applied a case study to him, and he favored it. Didn't go anywhere, but it was an interaction with the CEO. So.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I do that, and I have done that on LinkedIn where maybe I've worked with someone in a company, but not necessarily with the whole company. And I've reached out to someone on the C-level team to say, I've worked with one of your employees, and I really like how your company stands for this or that, and I'd love to connect here on LinkedIn and perhaps have a conversation down the road and get connected to all the time when I do that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm always reaching out to people that may not necessarily be in my universe, but if you have a reason for reaching out, there should be no reason stopping you from doing so. We actually had a speaker back in our New York group last summer, and she had this book called Getting There, and she interviewed 50 really amazing entrepreneurs, people from Sarah Blakely of Spanx to Michael Bloomberg to Warren Buffett. People are really hard to reach, but she did two things. She had a goal in mind, like why I'm reaching out to this person. Obviously, because she was writing this book about entrepreneurship and the struggles around entrepreneurship. But the second thing was she was really, really persistent, and she found different avenues to finding ways of connecting to those folks, whether it was online, offline, whether through various intermediaries. So she found a path to reach the people she wanted to reach. And Warren Buffett was famously difficult. It took a year for her to connect with Warren Buffett, but she finally was able to get that interview. So it's about persistence and whether you do it online. Online makes it easy because there are a lot of folks that are successful online. But for myself, I've reached out to plenty of book authors. I've reached out to CEOs of companies, invariably because I want them to be able to know about this group and to speak at this group at some time down the road.
I reached out to Craig of Craigslist, Malcolm Gladwell. I talked to him a couple times online. And the co-founder of LinkedIn, who no one knows his name, it's Konstantin Guricki. And I actually got him to come and speak at an event.
Cool. Maybe we should
Never
gang
hurts
up.
to ask, right?
Yeah, maybe we should like gang up and get a few folks here for Boston.
Yeah, let's do that.
And you want to have like an interesting connection story, like someone who's kind of like really out there that you were able to connect with?
I was going to ask how long it took you to get this co-founder of LinkedIn to speak.
It wasn't hard, but again, I leveraged. I was involved with MIT Enterprise Forum on the West Coast, so it wasn't like Cambridge here, headquarters, but nonetheless, I was able to leverage that we were doing a panel, so I did have a reason. So again, it goes back to reason, and there was potential added value for him. At that time, LinkedIn wasn't making any money, so it was very important. And Craig Newmark from Craigslist, he just does his own thing. He just said, no, I'm not really interested. I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah, I said I'm not really interested. I said, okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah, really, I'm a little late. I was wondering, if you're trying to target somebody that's hard to reach, do you recommend things like, I don't know, almost like stalking their service organizations they belong to, like charities, things like that, and just joining those? I mean, let's say you're in a market where there's only like a couple dozen customers you're trying to get, there's a decision maker in that customer.
I don't call it stalking, but I call it, yeah, I get in
That's
trouble.
not stalking.
I might get arrested.
We're professionals,
But there's
yeah,
a
that's
name
the
for it, it's called socially surrounding. And absolutely, I would absolutely do that. If I have something of value to add to that person and I can be helpful, you best. Absolutely.
And then, part of that, I mean, the whole foundation of all that though is, again, you have to be credible. So you have to have the brand. At least people know who's stalking me or socially surrounding me. Then there's obviously like a little bit more comfort because they know, okay, there's a few connection points.
It works really well in sales when someone, I'll use myself as an example, someone will have emailed me and I didn't get back to them yet because I'm on the road or doing something. And then I'll notice that they commented or they retweeted something on Twitter. I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta get back to them. So that happens all the time that we see those things and it jogs our memory. So that's good. We had a question in the back.
Well, just talking about online, offline, had a coworker who, in instances where they'd already had an interaction but they went radio silent, would follow up with certified mail signature required.
Yeah, why not? I love sending stuff in the snail mail because most people don't do it. So one of the first things when I meet someone, if they're a strategic partner or they're a potential customer or something, I always try to get their mailing address.
Maybe Meg wants to share a little story about something that may have been sent my way.
So I work for a firm called Something New. We're a corporate recruiting agency, but we're a startup.
So the company's called,
it's called
Something New.
Something New.
Okay.
So my founder is a big believer in handwritten notes, thank yous. I have a stack already within a year of every note he's written me, whether it was just to say, wow, man, like you're doing a fantastic job, or thank you so much for this, or a birthday card that I get on the day of my birthday. But we do the same things for our clients and even for prospective clients or friends. So he keeps stacks of amazing books. Trish is going to sign some books for us, and we send those out to people. He grabs Harvard T-shirts and Princeton T-shirts and sends them out to alumni, or we'll say, hey, Duke grad, sorry, you didn't win. You didn't win the championship this year, but here's a condolence prize. So it's all about that personal touch, and Mark, received a nice Something New package, and we send to a lot of our clients a box with a cigar and a card, and little things like that, kind of in celebration of either what you're doing or what you've accomplished.
And what was really personal about that is it was actually a T-shirt that he sent from my alma mater, Boston University. So thank you.
So again, with the personal, knowing and taking the time to.
It just shows that you took the time. He took the time, or you took the time, and you care. And it's just so hard to see that in the social channels today. It's really hard to see care and to see follow through. It's really easy to make noise.
So in the interest of time, I want to wrap this up. It's already 8:15. I want to ask,
For next time.
for the next time, I want to ask two last things.
Okay.
I forgot about asking you the question about
Yes.
the one thing people may not know about you,
Well,
besides LinkedIn.
besides LinkedIn, I don't think anyone here, Suzanne might know this, but most people don't know that I was a fundraising auctioneer. So I can talk like 2.5 5s, and then I have 10, 12.5, 15.5, $25 in the back, now $50, anyone else, 75, sold. And I still do that for charity, pro bono.
Very cool. Now the second question is there ever been like a book, it doesn't have to even be a book, but just something that's been inspiring of late you'd like to be able to share with folks?
I could segue it to your meeting next month.
then please do.
I'm a big fan of Trish Bertuzzi's new book, the Sales Development Playbook. It's excellent.
And to juice things up, I have a whole bunch of books that Trish will willingly sign, but I'm going to give away, some of these books. I'm going to make it a little bit fun. So if you're able to invite a few people, it will certainly help your chances.
Clearly one of the funniest people in New England, too.
And also one of the sharpest, because a lot of her experience around inside sales world is condensed into one very convenient, easy to read guide. And this stuff is on the money, so I'm really excited about next month's event.
Really good. So I recommend
Mark, do we know where it's gonna be yet?
Tentatively, we'll be here,
Okay.
but I'll let folks know if that changes. There is a Sox game, another home game that evening as well.
But you're all pros now of that.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more familiar with the surroundings, but I'll let folks know where it's going to be. Yeah, I don't send out too many emails, so just keep your eye out for that.
Thank you, guys. I hope you found it
Yeah.
valuable.
Thanks, Lori. Thank you.